Welcome back, everyone, to episode number 34 of the Beginner's Master Speedrun. As I'm beginning to record this, I'm realizing I'm kind of hot in this hoodie. So let me clap, and I'll magically undress. Okay, that's better. So I am coming into today rated 1453 on a 107 game win streak. As we saw in the last episode, my opponents are getting tougher, so I'll try and keep it going today. Let's hop into the first game. Okay, first opponent playing Peace Maxing. And I'll play e4. We have a King's Pawn opening. Knight c6. And I've cycled through a few different things. I've been playing Italian, Ponziani a bit. I'll play something that I don't think I've played yet, at least from the white side, is the Spanish opening, also known as a Ruy Lopez. A very popular opening. I mean, probably one of the most popular openings in chess. My opponent going straight away for the expansion, which I don't mind. Bishop finds a nice diagonal. And f6 is already kind of an ugly looking move for black. Like, even though it does create the pawn chain, it really weakens this diagonal and prevents a knight from coming to f6 as well. So I don't see any immediate way to punish this move. I mean, d4 definitely comes to mind. I am wondering though, like if I play d4 and then takes and then takes and then takes and then takes and then c5, there is a trap called the Noah's Ark trap where black can try and trap the bishop on b3. But I think in that line I'll have queen d5 and yeah, I'll just be threatening mate and the rook, and there's no great way for black to defend. So yeah, let's go for d4. I mean, especially when black moves f-pawn like this, it makes sense to try and open the center as quickly as possible, just to have more avenues to get to the black king. So we will trade. And I wonder if we're going to see this line, pawn c5. The first, it does look like black is winning material. But black plays it safe. Yeah, bishop b7. And now the threat is probably c5, because I don't have queen d5. Have to be a little bit careful. I mean, bishop takes knight comes to mind, simply to take away black's castling rights on the king side. But I don't think I want to trade off this bishop. Like, it's going to be a valuable piece, hopefully later on. And it's not easy to actually prevent c5 from happening. So what I probably want to do here is either move the queen or give my bishop some room to move. So a4 comes to mind, c3 comes to mind. If I play c4, there's still c5 and then b4. So I think I'll just go for pawn c3. This is a safe move. Black can expand. Yeah, pawn c5. Have to find a safe square for the queen. I don't want to move to d3, allowing c4. So I'll move to e3, keeping the pawn defended. This does block the bishop, but yeah, it's not the worst thing ever. I'll play bishop c2. So this is the reason why I played c3, was to give the bishop this square. Now black is preparing bishop to c5. So honestly, I thought I was going to be punishing this opening of pawn f6, but black is getting a reasonable position. So I think I'm best off just completing development, like castling kingside, and then the bishop c5, I'll slide the queen over. I'm not only saving the queen, but also attacking the pawn, getting ready to develop this bishop. Black defends with queen e7. So there's some pressure against the e4 pawn. I can't legally play pawn f3. But there's options here. I have knight d2, I have rook e1. I could also maybe start with bishop f4, just trying to develop before I bring the knight to d2. Choices, choices. I think I'll stay flexible here. I like the idea of rook e1, and then deciding what to do with the knight and bishop. It's also nice just aligning the rook, in this case with black's queen and king. There might be ideas eventually of playing e5 and then opening the file. And in the meantime, it's not easy for black to actually develop the knight. Black's playing d5, very aggressive move. My pawn is pinned to my rook, which is not defended. So definitely have to be careful here. This is one reason why it's nice to connect the rooks early, to have something to defend the rook. What to do? Because black wants to win the pawn. I could play pawn e5 now. And then there's some tension. I mean, if takes, I would win the queen. The drawback of pawn e5, I'm not actually threatening to take. I would still need to somehow defend my rook. So do I want to go for it? And if I don't play e5, like if I play bishop d2, I think that's too slow. Black will take. I could play knight d2 as a possibility. But I'm going to go for e5. I like the idea of creating tension. And I don't see like an obvious move for black in this position to try and prepare castling. The knight is still a bit stuck. If knight h6, I think I would just go ahead and take it and then develop. So definitely an interesting game to start the episode. I imagine white should be for choice here, just with a safer king. And in black developed the bishops, but they're not too dangerous yet in the position. Okay, we see pawn d4, so and black wants to get the pawn to d3. Now, the obvious move is to take, but then after bishop takes, yeah, there's a lot of tension with the e5 pawn. I do have another idea of playing bishop d2, defending the rook, and then if d3, maybe I can take on f6 to win the queen. So bishop d2. I don't think black can play d3 there. It looks kind of slow and passive, but it's very simply defending the rook and threatening to win black's queen. So we'll see how my opponent responds. Plays d3. Yeah, I think I can just take. And then if takes, I take. I mean, the knight can take, but then I can either save the bishop or maybe win the g7 pawn. So let's go for this. I mean, it does look scary with black having this connect 4 pawn chain deep in my territory now with pawn on d3. But I think everything is under control. Yeah, I'll take back queen on e1. And now it's a choice. Do I save the bishop or do I take the pawn on g7? If I take the pawn, I hit the rook, the knight, and the bishop. I think I take the pawn. Just trying to make sure there's no counterplay. And it's scary if pawn takes bishop, black's threatening to queen, also threatening the knight. Bishop takes f2. I'm going to take with my bishop. Yeah, that move kind of came out of nowhere. And now it's a mess, but I think it's a mess in white's favor. If I want to, I can just develop my knight, and then the rook prevents a pawn from queening. I could also take the rook first with check, and I think that's what I'll do. Black has no time to queen. King moves. Just realizing king f7 may have been a move there. And then maybe I would take the knight and save my knight. But here I can play queen g7 and yeah, eventually save the knight. Yeah, this may have not been the cleanest game, but very interesting game. Definitely worth analyzing afterwards. Now I'll play knight d2. This is not a worry at all. Allows queen takes b7. Rook e1 was maybe also possible there. Okay, black resigns. Yeah, it was up more than enough material there. So let's review. I mean, my opponent played pretty rare approach. Like usually in like against the Spanish, instead of b5 immediately, a more common move is knight f6. There is a line knight a5 here, which can lead to some potential complications. But yeah, f6 is probably like already a mistake. And maybe I was a bit too quick to play pawn d4. Like maybe I should have played c3 just to prepare it. Would have been a safer approach. But what happened in the game, I think white was doing well. I played pawn c3, c5. But black definitely got a very playable position. And the engine only slightly prefers white here. And let's get to where things got spicy. Like starting with d5. And e5 was the best move. And then bishop d2. Yeah, I think black was just a little bit too, what's the right word? Too negligent about the e-file. Went for d3, which looked nice, but yeah, lost the queen, and everything was under control. I think maybe in this position, I should not have taken the rook right away, because this would have allowed king f7. My queen would have actually been trapped here, but I still have the bailout, queen takes f6, and then save the knight. I would win the pawn and be up a piece with winning endgame. So everything was still under control. But yeah, crazy game to start this episode. Managed my time just well enough there. So let's keep it going. New game, new opponent, playing Abdella Hasfi. And I'll play e5. Maybe repeat the same opening from the black side. Are we going to see a Spanish? We see the start of an Italian. So what do I want to do? I'll play bishop c5. And knight f6. Generally, yeah, there's two kind of main moves between d3 and d4. d4 obviously is more direct. Best move is to take here. And now pawn e5. So chess.com is calling this the Giuco piano center attack. And it's definitely an ambitious line for white. I think a lot of players go wrong here with moving the knight. As far as I know, the best move is pawn d5, which I'll go ahead and play simply to counterattack the bishop. And we're getting another kind of messy position because I lose the knight, I'll take the bishop, and white takes the pawn on g7. So when I was pretty young, my chess coach showed me this position, and showed me like similar positions, and said that there's nothing to worry about from the black side. Even though I lost a pawn on g7, these pawns offer pretty good compensation. Now I'm pausing here. Of course, the obvious move is rook to g8, but I think it's worth considering queen e7. And I mean, white doesn't have too many options there, like king f1. I don't think king d2 is worth it for white. I mean, the idea would be to play rook e1, but I can then play rook g8, rook e1, and bishop to e6. So yeah, I like the prospect of starting with queen e7. And then with queen e2, I can trade and play d3, and then eventually play rook g8. And then I have some strong pawns in white's territory. And this could be the second straight game that we see a black pawn getting to d3 in the opening. It will be well supported and hard to remove. I imagine my opponent's debating between queen e2 and king f1 in this position. And if white plays king f1, then I think I have to play rook g8. And the plan going forward is to eventually castle queenside. Although now I'm realizing if king f1, rook g8, I would lose a pawn on d4. Which maybe means I should have kept the queen on d8 to support the pawn. Yeah, I'm regretting not having played rook g8 first. But, okay, I'll play rook g8 now. Imagine white's going to take. And it's going to be another, like, pretty messy position. Like, white's already lost casting rights. I do have a bit more development, but still requires a couple moves to get my king safe and rook into play. And there's a possibility, like, if white takes, and let's say I move back, white would have the idea of bishop h6 to defend the pawn. Maybe even bishop g5. Bishop g5, I'll have f6, though. And I'm not too concerned here. Like, I think after takes, I think I'll be likely to play bishop b6. And then, I mean, if I get in bishop f5 or bishop e6 and castle, the d-pawn should be a pretty clear target. I'm just making sure, like, bishop f5 and takes and bishop d3, king g1. It's kind of tempting. Bishop e2, but I don't think it's worth sacrificing the piece. So I'll play bishop b6. And if we count the pawns, I have 6 pawns, white has 7 pawns. So white is technically up a pawn here. But g7, I mean, I should be able to win at some point, even if white goes for bishop h6. Which white does. Yeah, I like the idea of bishop f5. Getting ready to play bishop d3, not only to attack the king, but also to obstruct the queen from defending d4. So yeah, pieces are decently placed for black here. I should also note that queen e2 doesn't work because bishop d3 pins the queen to the king. Okay, white goes with pawn d5. So definitely have some options here. Of course, bishop d3 is the most forcing move. I'm kind of inclined to calculate king g1 and takes and takes. Don't think it really leads to much. I could also start with queenside castling, which pins the d-pawn and then prepares to play bishop d3 to win the pawn. I'm going to go for that. I'm not scared of this because I have f6. I think I'm managing my time much better in this game. And my opponent is definitely taking more time than my last opponent. So knight c3 makes a lot of sense. Yeah, defending the pawn. And even if I play this, the pawn will still be defended by the knight. So again, I have some options. Knight b4 comes to mind. Kind of a multi-purpose move, applying more pressure to the pawn, but also maybe preparing knight d3. Also considering this move to threaten checkmate, but that walks into bishop e3. So, and there's also knight e5, perhaps trying to trade knights. But I like knight b4 the best. Like, there's cases where the knight kind of gets kicked around with a3, but in this case, if a3, I can either hop into d3, maybe even to c2, but probably not because rook c1. But there's also a3, bishop d3, king moves, and then I take the pawn. So I'm not actually sure what to expect from white here. It's not so easy to find a productive move. Queen d2 makes sense though, just perhaps trying to get the rook into play. So now, yeah, I can go for bishop d3, king g1, take the pawn. Looks like a very fine option. The other approach is to play knight d3, attacking f2 and preventing rook e1. So being a little bit less materialistic, but just going for domination. And honestly, I think I like knight d3 better. It's not the most forcing move, but it's very restrictive. And if I can win f2, that's gonna hopefully lead to white's position crumbling. I mean, white has bishop e3 here to defend, but then I can win the g-pawn. And if I can win the g-pawn, the g-file will be really nice to use for the rook, hopefully lead to a nice kingside attack. So maybe white can play knight d1. Yeah, defending f2 and b2. Feels very close to being very good. And the simple move is to take this pawn. And white defended 2 pawns, but and b2 is already defended, but yeah, it's leaving d5 undefended. So let's go ahead and take on d5. And the position's looking really nice now. And the pieces are pretty much on their optimal squares. I mean, there's this pawn that's kind of annoying, but it's really not a threat. There's really no way for white to make use of it. Now I'm eyeing this e1 square. I mean, white is threatening queen takes c4. So I'm basically scanning the position, looking for ways to create threats. Bishop g4 comes to mind, bishop a5 comes to mind. Maybe some move to attack the bishop, like queen e6. There's also rook e8 here, creating the battery. If I play rook e8, white might be ready to play knight e3. That could do a decent job of consolidating. So, I can't spend too much time here. What to do? Queen e6, queen takes c4. Well, maybe there's some nice tactics could happen. Queen e6. I'm going to play queen e6. It's slightly based on intuition, but also based on some calculation. So I'm attacking the bishop. If white plays queen takes c4, it does pressure the rook, but also aligns with my queen. And the tactics I'm looking at are kind of based around taking on f2 and then rook d1 to win the queen. So white plays bishop e3. Oh, I can't take the pawn yet because the queen does defend. Huh. Bishop e3. So maybe now bishop g4, just applying a bit more pressure. And the bishop wasn't really serving a purpose on f5. And with this move, I am threatening to take, and if white takes back, then the queen can come in, maybe have some mating attack. And I'm honestly not so concerned with losing the pawn, because then it could lead to me winning this pawn. Also, my knight's well defended by the rook as well. White plays knight g5. I think now things are looking pretty clear, because I can take on g5. And if bishop takes g5, I'll have some kind of forced checkmate. Queen e2, king g1, and bishop takes f2. So it took some time to get like a clear tactic there, but I think I'm finally being rewarded for my pieces being on good squares. And yeah, the king's not going to survive much longer. Take on f2. A very interesting game, though. It seems like the theme, at least of these first two games, are just just getting complete messes in the opening. So let's take a look. Starting with the opening, I think this is, I mean, it's definitely a tricky line you have to be ready for if you play a king's pawn opening as black. The more frequent move for white is bishop e5 in this position, simply pinning the knight. And then I think there's some theory surrounding knight e4 and then pawn takes pawn. I have played this at least once from the white side in a serious tournament. But yeah, after d5 and pawn takes knight and pawn takes bishop, black is objectively for choice here, but it's still tricky, and it's definitely a wild position. Looking queen e7 was one of the best moves after king f1, rook g8. Yeah, it was fine for black to lose the d4 pawn, just because there's more development, and yeah, I think the position was just easier to play for black. And we see like white tried to keep everything under control, but really never got a chance to get the king safe and get this rook into play. And that's one of the drawbacks with losing castling rights from early on. Just go forward here. Yeah, queen e6 was a nice idea. And I think it was a pretty clean game on my part. Just a lot of moments where I had some decisions to make. So yeah, nice game. Let's keep it going. Play at least one more. Playing Zhao QM. I'll play e4. And we have a Sicilian. I've not encountered the Sicilian in this speedrun in it seems like a long time. I kind of have to think what to play against this this e6 on move 2. There's a lot of options for white. I mean, obviously I can go for open Sicilian, which is probably the most common, but I think I'll go for a delayed Alapin, which is c3. And this is reminiscent of a Ponziani, where white just wants to take over the center with the pawns. So if pawn takes pawn, I can take back with my pawn, grab some space. Black goes for knight to f6, and I'll keep developing, knight c3. And, I mean, I could play e5 right away, but I'll start with bishop d3, perhaps preparing the eventual pawn e5. Also making sure that if black plays d5 and I play e5, there wouldn't really be knight e4. Okay, so going forward from here, I think the obvious move is just to castle and enjoy the space advantage. But I'm very tempted to play a move here which sets up a kind of nasty idea. And I think I'm going to go for it, is pawn to h4. Normally I wouldn't do this, like especially in these speedrun episodes where I'm trying to be solid. But I do want to demonstrate like a really nice idea that this move prepares. And I'm pretty sure black is allowing it here. The point is basically to play pawn e5, get rid of this knight on f6, and then go for the bishop takes h7 sacrifice. This is known as Greek gift. And the reason why I want my pawn here is to support the eventual knight g5 check. And if takes, I'll be able to take back and unleash the h-file. So it's kind of a deep idea, but I think it's going to work out pretty nicely here. Because eventually this knight will have to move. After takes, my pawn's defended by the knight. And I'm pretty sure, like, wherever the knight moves here, I'm ready to take on h7. And just to show, king takes h7, knight g5. If a king moves back, queen h5, and black will have so few ways to defend against a mate threat with queen h7. Now there is maybe one small question here. Do I want to take on d5 first? I could take and then go for the Greek gift. But I think I'm okay just yeah, sacrificing the bishop right away. Go for it. I actually don't know why it's called the Greek gift. I am gifting my opponent a bishop. Maybe it originated in Greece. But black is already pretty limited with options here. If king h8, I can still probably go for knight g5 to prepare queen h5. So knight g5 will be coming. Now black does have a few moves here. I mean, king g6 is maybe the best try. King h8, unfortunately for my opponent, gets mated on the next move. So, okay, pretty quick game. Let's take a look, and hopefully this provides some nice instructive value how to attack from early on. Yeah, h4 is definitely not the most conventional move, but as we just saw, black has to be really careful against such a move. Maybe black should have played h6 just to discourage pieces from coming to g5. But after knight d7, e5, and takes, knight d5. Oh, wow. So the engine is actually saying that bishop takes h7 was not a winning move. What I should have done was take the knight first, and then take, and then sacrifice a bishop. This would have been a winning combination. So I guess the question is, why is bishop takes h7 not winning? After takes here, black could have survived with king g8. Which is actually really surprising because I would have thought queen h5 is lights out for black. But black has a defense knight f6, either knight to f6, giving back the piece. And black's actually very much surviving here. Takes and takes, queen's attacked, h7 is defended, and the game would have gone on. And yeah, material's equal, but yeah, maybe black has a more stable position. My king's still uncastled. Engine does prefer black. So what if I took on d5 in this position? Wow. Okay, this is not easy to find, especially at this rating level. But the only move for black to survive here is not to take the knight, because then queen h5 is crushing, but there's queen a5 check. And then if I move my king, there's queen takes d5. If I go for queen h5, there's queen d3. Check, and the queen is guarding h7. I have no attack, and I'm down a piece. Queen g6 is coming. Yeah, black would have been surviving there. So, yeah, I would have had to play the move knight c3, but then I lose a pawn on e5. And let's say bishop e3, I'm just not in time to get the attack. Black has knight f6. Black is, again, a little bit for choice. So this is actually a big lesson for me that, yeah, maybe before going for these crazy sacrifices, I should take a moment to calculate the resources for my opponent. Of course, it would have been hard to find, but yeah, definitely an important lesson to take away is like when your opponent plays such a move, maybe that you overlooked, you should not give up right away, and you should really fight to find the defensive tries. So yeah, some instructive games today. Hope you guys enjoyed them. If you have questions, do leave them below, and stay tuned for more. I'll see you guys soon.